Thanks for joining us for this archive of Ashbrook and Teaching American History's special webinar for October 28th, 2020. Today's webinar, The Elections of 2020, consisted of a conversation between Dr. Jeff Sikkenga, Executive Director of the Ashbrook Center and Professor of Political Science at Ashland University, and Dr. Jim Caesar of the University of Virginia. Thanks for listening.
Hi, I want to welcome everybody to this major issue lecture series webinar on the elections of 2020. I'm Jeff Sikkenga, Executive Director of the Ashbrook Center. Delighted to be with you all. I think as many of you know, the Ashbrook Center is an independent educational center located at Ashland University in Ashland, Ohio. We were inaugurated in 1983 by President Ronald Reagan, and ever since then we've been running programs both here on campus and around the country for students, teachers, and citizens, all connected to our mission, which is to strengthen constitutional self-government by educating our fellow Americans in the history and principles of our country and in the habits of thought and reflection necessary for self-government. And this seminar today is really part of carrying out that mission. And especially, I think, thinking carefully and deeply about these pivotal elections that are facing us now in just a week. We're going to have a conversation because that's the Ashbrook way. We don't think of education as indoctrination, of course not. We also don't think about it simply as information, but as discovering the truth for yourself, as thinking with others, whether those others are with us now in the present or thinking with others from the past, the great minds, the great thinkers, the great statesmen of the past, engaging in conversation. As I've said many times, our programs are rooted in the principle that goes all the way back to Aristotle, that all people desire to know. And then we add, but they don't want to be told. They want to discover it for themselves. So that's what we're here to do, and we believe in discovering it through conversation. So we're going to have a conversation today. Please be part of that conversation. Send us your questions through the Q&A function that we have here. We will get to as many of those as we can. I know there'll be many. It's a really interesting and engaging topic. And as I say, we'll get to as many as we can. But we're delighted to have with us today Professor James W. Caesar. He is the Harry Byrd Professor of Politics at the University of Virginia, where he has been since 1976. He must have arrived there as a very young lad. He is the director of the program on constitutionalism and democracy, which is a really fine program there at the University of Virginia. He's also a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution at Stanford University. Jim has held visiting professorships at a number of important universities, including universities in Europe, Oxford University, the University of Florence, the University of Basel, and the University of Bordeaux, among others. I sometimes think if Europeans want to understand America, they just bring Jim over to Europe and he helps them understand America. And in fact, he's written a wonderful book on the European understanding or misunderstanding of America. Jim got his PhD from Harvard University, although he is originally, of course, connected to the great state of Ohio. And so delighted to have him back with us. He's the author of many books. He's a prolific scholar. He's written books on American politics, including books, I think, on at least the last three, maybe last 4, 5, 6 presidential elections, going at least back to 2000 and maybe even farther than that. Has worked with a number of great co-authors, people like Andy Bush, who would be familiar to some of you, who also teaches in Ashbrook's master's program. Jim is also probably the nation's leading authority in American political thought and development. He is one of the pioneers in this field. He has really revived the study of American institutions, political institutions, and connecting them with the larger questions of American political thought. It is unfortunately a discipline that in some ways almost disappeared, but Jim has helped to bring it back and teaches a lot of great graduate students who go on out and then bring this American political development mode, this really great mode of thinking about America out into the academy. So he's doing yeoman's service on behalf of the Republic and on behalf of the discipline of political science. I also have a personal connection with Jim. He was my undergraduate thesis advisor at the University of Virginia, the first person to turn my mind to the mind of Edmund Burke, who I discovered, fell in love with, and would not have if it had not been for Jim. So I owe him that personal thanks as well. I found him always to be an original mind, not captive to any particular cant or opinion, always thinking for himself. His writings reflect that. His lectures reflect that. And all of his work reflects that. So delighted to have that original mind with us today to think about something that a lot of people are not shedding a lot of particular original light on, which is the elections of 2020. So Jim, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for that really kind introduction, Jeff. I've never been introduced so well.
Well, let me start with this, because obviously you have studied presidential selection. One of your first major books, which made a huge impact in the field, was on presidential selection. You've written deeply in a number of books on American politics. You've thought about presidential elections. When you look at this presidential election of 2020, does it look like some other past elections? Is there something similar about this that compared to other elections, or is there something unique and new about the elections of 2020?
Well, Jeff, as you mentioned, you were one of my students at UVA, and I may have taught you the term sui generis. That's a Latin term. Maybe some of your students there have come across it, which means one of a kind, or unlike any other. And I believe, begin with that Donald Trump is one of a kind, unlike anyone else who has been president. In fact, it was even run for president. One part of the Biden campaign, a large part, there's a number of elements, but a large part is to make it a referendum on Donald Trump. And not primarily on what he's done, though that's part of it, but because of who he is. To so many of his opponents, he is viscerally unfit for the office, corrupt, dishonest, megalomaniac, racist, unpresidential. You could go on and on and on. He has no right, in the view of many, to be president. Constitutional rules notwithstanding, many regard the fact he may have won, but they don't accept his victory, which is something, should he win, could be a problem after the election, of whether people will accept this without some degree of violence. So you cannot overestimate the personal animus that exists against Donald Trump. It's unprecedented. On the other hand, I won't go too far there, a lot of people who are aware of some of his flaws, but for whom he's greatly beloved. I mean, look at, just turn on the television in the last week, you get a picture of this. There are these rallies, if you could call them that Joe Biden is conducting, and there are maybe 20 people there, a bunch of cars in a parking lot. He shows up, he says a few words and gets out of there. But the immense amount of energy that's found in the Trump campaign, including, say, last night in Nebraska, I don't know, it was 10 degrees above zero or something like that. And streams of people are showing up, indicating the kind of commitment that he has. And that has to count for something, win or lose. So I think that gives the account. I don't see any past campaigns that are really close to it. You could stretch a little bit, I suppose, if you wanted to, and say maybe Andrew Jackson. That goes back a long, long time. But Andrew Jackson, it was nominated without receiving the nomination of a party. He was nominated by state legislatures, conventions that grew up. There was no party. And you could say almost the same thing for Donald Trump. Yes, he ran in the Republican Party, but he didn't run really as a traditional Republican. He was despised by everyone in his party. The professionals in the party had no use for him. The closest any professional came to supporting him, and it was only halfway, was Jeff Sessions. We know where he is now, but an enemy of Trump. But going into the convention, very few Republicans wanted him. So in a way, he ran on his own, like Jackson. And he had this other quality, which I think he shares with Jackson even more. He's the most unpresidential president we've ever had. deliberately unpresidential, but unpresidential. We associate presidential, I think, with Washington, a certain bearing, a certain distance, a desire to be president of all the people and not a part of it. And here Donald Trump comes in. He makes fun. He has riffs in some of his speeches on how he could be presidential, but he doesn't want to be. He mocks it. He uses mild profanity in his language as president on a stage, which I don't think anyone has done before. Lots of profanity we have on tapes and everything like that, but not in speeches, and so on and so forth. He's always attacking others. He's a different kind of person as president. So I think he shares that a little bit with Jackson, who had that same reputation as a kind of populist, non-presidential, not accepted by many others for a while as president.
Yeah, it reminds me of Tocqueville's remark about Jackson, which is when he traveled America, he said he found that the enlightened classes, as he called them, all despised Jackson, but the people loved him.
Yeah, and Tocqueville despised Jackson too. Maybe he went a little too far. I've heard, David Nichols, who another student who may be familiar to some of your students, he kind of likes Andrew Jackson. Thought in that case Tocqueville went too far, but that is exactly right. The educated classes then were the Whig Party on the East Coast, particularly the people that Tocqueville met, that spent a lot of time with in those states, presidents of Ivy League colleges, and they had no use for Jackson. He was a mortal enemy, the opposition to the Whig Party, and so forth.
So Jackson, of course, had Martin Van Buren.
He did.
Trump's campaign seems not to have a Martin Van Buren, or does it? Is there a mind behind what appears to be the chaos, or is it Donald Trump's mind? And how does that compare when we look at the Biden campaign, which you mentioned briefly?
Yeah, well, when he first ran for the presidency in 24 and 28, Van Buren became associated with them after 28, but was not a personal advisor in any way. And Jackson, in that sense, was his own man with his own views. And Trump has had some people around him, but in his family in particular. But I don't think you could say that anyone really shaped, if you could call it, his thinking. Or Steve Bannon had some impact for a while. Miller, I think, has always had an impact. He's the one of his advisors. I think he's had some people around, but we don't associate Donald Trump as listening to someone. There's no Henry Kissinger who stands in the background and forms his views. And there is a question to what extent he's motivated by ideas. I think in some ways he is. There's dispositions that he follows, and you can attribute ideas, but he's not an idea person, and that may be a real advantage. He works in a different way. So maybe Jared Kushner, but he's far too young to be a true advisor. He's a son-in-law and very helpful. But I think that is true. He's kind of his own person, Trump.
Contrast that with Biden's campaign. So, some people are they're pointing out exactly what you pointed out at the beginning. It seems to be slips out of his basement, has a few rallies, comes back. People are wondering, is that because that's all he can do and all he can handle, or is that a strategic decision to have the campaign be a referendum on Trump out there in the public and keep Biden as the safe, responsible choice, so to speak?
Yeah, it's hard to say about Biden. We don't know his medical condition, but I believe at least you can say he's aware of the fact that he's not always aware. He knows he's going to go and make mistakes. I don't think there's any question about that. He has that degree of command over his senses. So why go out? Look at it from his point of view. He's ahead. The strategy of not campaigning actively is not, according to the polls, hasn't hurt him. In fact, he's gone up rather than down following this strategy. So from his own point of view, it doesn't make sense to risk things. And so he doesn't. And when he goes out, he sometimes makes mistakes, but this is the way he proceeds. He was smart enough to study very, very hard for his debates. And in the first debate, I think he beat Trump because of Trump's peculiar habits, but not in the second debate. But I think he thinks that it's not a good strategy. And he's smart in that respect. It's a wise strategy. I think, you can say of Biden that he hasn't presented that much of a program, but now over the course of the campaign, he's made it clear that he intends to be something different than a left-wing Democrat. And he's sent that signal. It says the Democratic Party is me, and enough of Bernie, et cetera. Whether he'll govern that way is another question altogether.
All right, so off that question, I know some students have asked me this question. I wanted to pose it to you. When you're looking at this election right now with Trump and Biden, what does it show us about the state of the two political parties? What is, for example, what is the contemporary Democratic Party, and what does this election mean for it?
The Democratic Party is really two parties. It's split very severely, and that was made clear during the primary season, where you had a whole group of candidates, let's say on the progressive or the socialist or the woke left, some combination of that. Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, Kamala Harris while she was in, and on and on and on. And then you have a sort of moderate part to the party, of which Joe Biden was one, Klobuchar another, Buttigieg on one day, depended which day it was on, but he eventually sort of ended up on that side. And they're quite split. In fact, that would have been close to the split in the American politics before Donald Trump came and gave us another poll. So that's I think the state of the party, and we don't know what's going to happen in the case of a Biden victory. He's obviously going to try and balance the two, maintain control. I think, going to another point, if Biden should be elected and the Republicans should control the Senate, which is possible, it's up in the air, that would be the most advantageous for Biden if he wants to remain a centrist. If you go in to the left, he could just say, well, sorry, fellows, I'd really like to help you out, but I can't. But they have said, and quite clearly, the left, that he owes us, and we expect that he's going to pay us. The question is, to go to Trump's rhetoric, is he a Trojan horse? I like that classical analogy. I don't know where Trump came up with it, but a Trojan horse. And I don't know how he's going to come out on that. He's going to. The thing about the center of the Democratic Party that I've spoken of is, name a leader from the center, but besides Biden, name an articulate, important person that shows up on television to speak for a centrist view of the Republican Party. Now, I know in 2018 midterm elections, you had a lot of congressmen in the Midwest from the Democratic Party who won, who beat out Republicans, but they're like invisible. For a time, Nancy Pelosi sided a little bit with the center on certain votes, but I never knew who she was siding with. They never pop up on television. I never see them on CNN or MSNBC or anything like that. So it's a large part of the party, which we saw from the primaries, because they surprisingly quickly defeated, after South Carolina, quickly defeated the left, which has sort of collapsed in the party. But there's no one leading it. So that's a problem. I don't know what his cabinet will look like, but I still think the energy in the Democratic Party, the brains and the energy, is coming from the left. And energy is an underappreciated quality in our politics.
What about if Biden loses? What does that mean for the Democratic Party?
If Biden loses, I think this opens things up finally and completely to the left. It's hard going into the future. It's hard to say how the center of the party, which doesn't have that much prominence or ideas or figures, is going to be able to prevail against the left. That would be my guess. There's just so much on the left, so many important people. I see the left taking over, even if it doesn't have the numbers. Now, it could be someone more moderately on the left. It could be a Buttigieg type who sort of straddles, but I think the left will have the stronger voice. I'm still waiting for that leader of the center, which hasn't occurred.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And if you compare it to the Republican Party, what's the contemporary? I mean, because Trump has really scrambled things in the Republican Party, obviously. I mean, we're hearing Republicans talk and Republicans at rallies, praising things, praising attacks on NAFTA and cheering attacks on NAFTA. which, that goes back to the early 20th and late 19th century sort of republicanism and tariffs and all of that. What is the contemporary Republican Party?
Well, if we start with Trump as representing the Republican Party, or a large part of it as it is now, you'll notice that at the Republican convention, I don't think I heard the name Ronald Reagan mentioned. Maybe I fell asleep, but I don't think it was mentioned. So you have a reversal, not that Trump ever attacked Reagan, but when you look at all the elections from the 80s on, they've all been in some ways a rerun of the election of 1980, with Reagan being praised, his views being praised, and a lot of those views are now rejected. In the Republican Party, for example, on foreign affairs, used to be the Republican Party was a kind of neoconservative or a conservative internationalist party. Now it's an American first party, which means you want to be strong, you want to be tough, but you don't want to be unnecessarily involved in foreign affairs. And he's pulling troops out everywhere. It's a different foreign policy. But back to domestic policy, he's resurrected. I'll put it this way: what happened to Adam Smith, who used to be the hero of the Republican Party? Not so much. He's spoken of tariffs. He's introduced tariffs. He hasn't praised free trade. He said in many respects it's hurt the American worker. There's even an intellectual branch that has grown up within the Republican Party that asserts this completely. They have split from this idea of free market being the be-all and end-all, and split also even from the rich being as rich as they are. They're a more populist underclass party than they were before. So that's another part that has changed in the Republican Party. And you could go on. I could mention other parts of the party. Immigration. There was always a split, but previously the Republican Party was more a party that favored or tolerated immigration, including illegal immigration, including even, I would say, the Wall Street Journal, which is otherwise sound, was never happy with the Trump view on immigration. He has really changed that. And that's part of American First, that to have a country, you have to have borders, but it's also the idea is you think of what's important to the tradition of America, rather than just opening the doors, whoever wants to come in. So he's suspicious, therefore, of an understanding of politics, which isn't rooted in the nation. The nation is the key to his understanding, which is, I think, different from the Republican Party of the past. And I know I'm going on too long, but I'd say this: there are a lot of Republicans who think that if Trump is defeated next week, assuming it is next week and not next month or next year, if Trump is defeated and defeated badly, including the Senate, that all of a sudden the Republican Party is going to regard Trump as a parenthesis and return to what the Republican Party was before. So you have all these people, you can think of them, who write in the media: Pete Wehner, a speechwriter of Bush, Mike Gerson, I could go on, Jennifer and Rubin and others. They're all sort of thinking, Trump loses, he's disgraced, and they're going to welcome us back. The Bulwark, that's a magazine that Bill Kristol is now associated, will become the new standard for the Republican Party. My argument is, I don't think so. I think the Republican Party has changed considerably. It won't be as Trump if Trump should lose in a disgraceful way. It'll be maybe a different Trump, a more moderate Trump, maybe someone, but the Trump influence will remain, for better or for worse. It could be someone like, say, DeSantis or someone like that, as the kind of straight-faced Trump without Trump.
Well, that was because that's been a question. In fact, we have a question from one of our attendees about this, which is essentially, is there Trumpism, as people are calling it, without Trump? And you seem to be suggesting, a lot of people are saying, no, it's completely rooted in personality. And once that personality, if he were to lose, shows itself not to have lasting, staying political power, that the movement is sort of an evanescent personality-based thing, will recede, and Republican Party and conservatism will return to what it was before. You're suggesting that's not right.
That's what I think. I don't think it's going to become the Paul Ryan party, for better or for worse. Paul Ryan, wanted to be very careful about spending. This party is not careful about spending, huge deficits. It's a different party. And I don't think it's going to completely fade away. I think it has a lot of purchase. So I think these people in the Never Trump movement are not going to have an easy home. They're not going to be welcome back. I could be wrong about this, but the idea that it's just a parenthesis, I think, is false. If you look at where some people have moved since 2016, take Marco Rubio. You know, he was sort of a mainline Republican in 2016, but I don't know how many people have followed his speeches and everything. You've seen a real evolution in his thought away from being a strictly 2016 type of Republican. And even Ted Cruz, whose whole project was on just running on the Constitution and on laissez-faire, and small government, I think he's been moving as well. So they've all been moving. Where they end up, I'm not exactly sure. Maybe you could say it would be the end of the Republican Party, that this isn't the beginning, but it's the end. On that point, even if Trump loses, I would look at what's happening in the outcome of the election. Going back a number of years when Romney ran for president, the idea was we should run president and try and attract Blacks and Hispanics. That's the only way we're going to win. Look at the demography of the country. And they had a way of attracting Blacks and Hispanics, which is essentially relying on government programs that would aid and assist them, somewhat akin to the Democratic Party. I think now the one who's appealing to Black and Hispanic people to some degree is Trump. We'll see this next Tuesday. He may lose the election. How much will he have gained among Black voters is a big question, especially among Black males. Maybe he could get to 15 or 20%, showing that there's another way, because it is true, the demographics as you move into the future does not bode well for the Republicans. You can see that. They can't keep winning if their base remains the same and the Democratic base keeps expanding as it is. So it's too much of a problem for the Republicans. They have to expand the base. And if you could expand the base in a Trumpian way, and he can prove that at least he did that, that would open up the party to a new direction.
And so does this mean then, if Trump were to lose, what will happen? You talked about within the conservative movement or within conservative intellectuals, will there just continue to be these powerful divides and arguments, which are as strident as they probably have ever been, in fact? The Bill Kristols of the world and others who are sort of unrepentant never Trumpers, and then others who have sort of either adapted themselves to this or wholeheartedly embraced the Trump view. Will there be among conservatives this continuing conflict?
I guess if I had to guess on this, I would say that these people are not going to be welcomed back with open arms, and that the party will be shifting in a Trump direction. Those people will not be part of the Republican Party, a mainstream elements of the Republican Party in the future. I don't know where they're going to go. They can keep writing for the New York Times. At that point, the New York Times will have no use for them as Biden as president. I mean, they were, I won't say useful idiots, that's unfair, but they were useful to the New York Times to hire them because they sort of represented Republican mainstream who opposed Trump. And that's what the Times and the Post wanted. But they won't have that function after the election. So I don't think they'll have a major role. That's a guess.
Fair enough. Right. Let me ask you this. Another question some students have asked me, which is 2016 and 2020 on the surface look a lot alike. Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden on the one side, sort of very establishment, old-time establishment Democrats on the left, but not way on the left, at least as the Democratic Party goes, both running against Trump. One of the amazing things about Trump is he seems not to have changed in 2020 from 2016 at all. The way he campaigns, the arguments he makes, the positions he takes, he seems to delight in the fact that he has not changed and become a swamp creature, as he calls them. He doesn't talk in a presidential way, as you say, sometimes even deliberately, and he knows this. on the surface, 2016 and 2020 look very similar. And if we look at the polls, what states are important, how tight things are, the two races look very similar. Are there any important differences that you're seeing?
Well, one is that Trump has been president. And so therefore, in a way, when you're president, you're always going to look at the performance of the president. And I don't think we go back to February of this year, to say pre-virus. And Trump had made the point several times, you might not like me, but you're going to have to vote for me next November because of, and then he would list the accomplishments of the economy. And I think he was right that there would have been a lot of people who, even though they disliked Trump, and many did, there was no doubt about that, would have ended up saying, okay, he has to be president, things are better. Now, so the bad luck, you could say, of the virus, or the change that the virus has made a lot of difference. It's given the Democratic Party an avenue by which to attack him. Now, not always a coherent avenue, but an avenue nonetheless. And it's said, or they have said, that they had a plan and would have steadfastly refused to do what Trump had done. I don't know what the plan is, but they claim to have had it. And of course, Trump made the mistake, which he should never have done, of giving an interview to Woodward. I would never have done that. It made it look that he didn't do anything. Now you can go back and ask this, whether he did or he didn't, or whether we should have had a national plan, et cetera. But that's how a lot of people think. They think from where they are today, and this causes problems for a lot of people. The economy has improved since the low of the pandemic, but there's still a lot of people unemployed and a lot of people in hard straits, and they're holding that against them. That's another part of the Biden campaign. So that's a big difference. I also think that all of the violence that we've had in the last 6 or 7 months, a terrible amount of violence and militias in our cities, breakdown, that there's this question of normalcy, which is looming over this election, that the left and Biden argues, if you vote for me, not only we will get rid of Donald Trump, that's for sure, but I'll bring you normalcy. That's one of his arguments. We yearn for normalcy. And this guy is reckless. This guy is dangerous. He is the cause of the disruption in our cities and whatnot. And so a vote for Trump, for Biden, is a vote for normalcy. And we see the change where I think, at least in the polls, have suggested that Biden has picked up, is among old people. The old people are cautious, and cautious about the pandemic, cautious about everything, and seem to think, well, if we just elect a Biden, things will die down. There'll be no more problems, no more Portland, no more Seattle. We'll go back to normalcy. Same with women voters. This is a huge group that Trump was able at the last minute to capture in 2016. I'm talking about Republican leaning, or formerly Republican suburban women. It's questionable whether they'll support him in the same degree come next Tuesday. They've indicated that they won't. Maybe there's still time for change. So the argument for normalcy is an important part of the Biden campaign, and he just sort of sits back and acts in this way that would allow to say he's a decent guy. I think in this case, it is true that Trump provokes, and as a president, in our country, we have the president as the leader of the whole nation and the leader of the party. That is a strange role, or a partisan leader. And, when it comes to being leader of the nation, Trump frequently, most of the time, goes out of his way not to be. He's insulting someone. Every so often he can be the leader of the nation, but he's always in conflict. He lives on conflict, probably eats it for breakfast. And the tweets and whatnot are part of this. So a lot of people are under the impression that if they get rid of Trump, they'll bring us back to normalcy. But the other view would be it's a fool's errand. You go in this direction and you elect someone because they say they're going to be normalcy. Normalcy on whose terms? I've seen this happen in the university and everything. Oh, if we just don't invite conservative speakers, there'll be no problem. Yeah, we'll have peace. But on whose terms? That's the part that's not going. So the Republican response is we have to continue this battle. The objective is to win, not to be normal on someone else's terms. So that's an important issue, another issue in this campaign, maybe the deepest issue, because the campaign is superficially and importantly about the virus and about the performance of the economy. But there's a much deeper theme in this campaign, is the status of the country in America and where the two parties stand. What about the woke element in the Democratic Party? The woke element meaning the part that wants to completely redefine what America is, see it in its America in its various group terms, race terms, ethnic terms, rather than a unity, versus another view on the right. These are important questions, and right beneath the surface. They may not be, as I said, determining every vote right now, but that's going to be a consequence of this election, who wins. Because winning is important because you hold power, but it's also important if you would have you show where the majority is. And going back to Tocqueville, he says elections are important because they show where the majority is. And of course, the Democrats think, and they do have a national majority. Even if Trump wins this election, I think he has a good chance. If he wins this election, he won't have a national majority. The majority is on the Democratic side. He's going to have to fight over the next 4 years if he's interested in building a party that would have a numeric majority as well as an electoral college majority.
But clearly, one of the qualities that propelled Trump in 2016, and that, as you say, he seems to have eat conflict for breakfast, was that kind of Republicans and conservatives, and just sort of the ordinary the demographic of folks who have really shifted to Trump is particularly in the Midwest states, which is working people, especially white working people without a college degree. These folks for whom Make America Great Again really resonates as a theme, as an idea. They like his fighting spirit. A lot of, if you listen to some of these folks, they will say, George Bush was a nice guy, but got punched around all the time and never fought back. John McCain wanted to be a Democrat sometimes and therefore was always hurt by these attacks. Mitt Romney was a gentleman. We don't need any more gentlemen. We don't need any more statesmen. We need a brawler to fight back. Particularly, the argument is against a left that is woke and angry and wants to fight. And Trump is the only Republican/conservative type who will actually fight back without accepting, as you put it, without accepting the terms or the terms of engagement that the other side wants to propose. Does that have any resonance in this election?
Yeah, I mean, that is exactly right. That's how he won. And, and you go for counties up in Michigan, I won't mention Ohio, but which was steadfastly Trump, but I visited all those counties afterwards that either flipped from Obama to Trump, or in which Trump did much better than it previously. That's where the election was won, in Pennsylvania and in Wisconsin and in Michigan. The problem going forward, though, is that enough? He has those people. He may have lost a few of them, as I mentioned, the older part of them, but he has that part of the vote, and he's beloved among those people. They're the ones who are coming out. Is that enough? And is it enough even in these states? We're going to see. That'll determine the election. I mean, there's other ways that Trump can win with doing less well in maybe losing Wisconsin and Michigan. There's still ways that he can win. But if he's going to repeat 2016, that will be a telltale sign. As I said, a lot of these people are dying. They don't reproduce quite as much. There's more people going to the university and moving to the other side. The party does have to change somewhat, and it could change on Trumpian grounds. You would have a component of the party which would be Hispanic. Why not? Hispanic Trumps. A party of the part of the party which would be black, at least the larger part that would be pro-Trump. That base has to expand for the party to be able to sustain a majority.
It is interesting. My parents live in Muskegon County, Michigan, which is where I was born and raised. That was a county that went for Obama twice and then flipped Trump in 2016, or narrowly. And in fact, the president just stopped there last week to hold a rally at the Muskegon County Airport. And if you go out in the suburban area where my parents live, it's amazing how many Biden signs you see around their neighborhood. As soon as you go out into the country area or the exurbs, where normally they would have been sort of blue-collar Democrats, all you see are Trump flags and Trump signs.
I can tell you this, Jeff. I live in Charlottesville. I think it's the furthest point west where everything is Democrat. The minute you go west of Charlottesville, almost the minute you get out of town, you can go across the entire country. You might have to make a few jigs around some college towns. You can go across the whole country of the United States and be in Trump country. And I saw that in 2016, even though I said that, I think I said it at Ashland, that probably Hillary was going to win. I didn't believe it in my heart when I drove across and saw what it was like. It was just overwhelmingly disposed towards Trump. Now, another point we didn't get to, I want to get this off my chest, is in 2016, what's different? It has to do with the communication system of our country. I think Biden is playing this well. He knows what the communication system is, or as people have told him, he can perform his campaign the way he's performing it, with the knowledge that the communication system, namely the media, is going to perform in a certain way. And that allows him to do it. For example, he's conducted this campaign, I think, intelligently enough, knowing that no one's going to ask him a hard question. And you go through, no one has asked him a hard question. No one has pressed him. It's pretty amazing, but that's the media. If they, and he simply refuses to appear on something like Fox News or anything where they're going to ask him difficult questions, and he can get away with it. Nothing has been more systematic than this the recent Hunter Biden thing. Whatever you make of the Hunter Biden, whether it's important or unimportant, it's obvious, I think, at this point to any sane person that the computer in Delaware that was discovered with Hunter Biden's computer, that it was his computer, that these messages are on the database of that computer, that he did meet with all these people, that his old view that he had no connection to these things is fallacious. It's obvious to anyone who looks at it. But I remember looking the day after this story first broke at the Washington Post the next day. On the front page, of course, nothing about this, but a story that anything about the leak of this computer was now known to be, by international experts in our system, was now known to be a Russian plant. And this view has been promulgated day after day, so that the efficacy of the story, if it's going to have any efficacy, has just not taken place. It does not appear in the news media. So you really do have a situation, Fox News aside, where the Democratic Party can count on this. And I think the pages of the Washington Post and the New York Times reflect this. This is a hard haul for Trump. He attacks the news media and provokes them, but they are that way. The news is a different thing than it was, even in 2016. There was maybe even a pretension to a kind of pre-1916, going back, a kind of being nonpartisan, but this is gone. If you ask what journalism today is, it is no longer the effort of journalists to objectively report news. That's not what they say they do. That's not what they do. It's obvious if you read the newspapers. We're in a different age, and that's disturbing. I don't think it's going to change, but Republicans have to live with that. They're really on the minority side of this equation, and suffer from it immensely.
That was one of our questions from our attendees, which is,
will
that
have that, thanks for that
impact
question
on the election? It was that I think you answered that really well. A couple more questions from our attendees. We've got a lot of questions coming in, but what about a person raises a question about the consequences of Trump's criticism of mail-in and absentee ballots? And of course, the Supreme Court considering these questions even recently. is this new way of voting going to have an effect in favor of the Democrats or the Republicans, or will it be a wash? What do you think?
For 20 years, you mentioned those books we've been writing. I actually started in 1992. But we were opposed to this idea of mail-in ballots, on the idea, since you mentioned Aristotle, that the election ought to have unity of time and place, so it should be on election day. And also the possibility that there could be fraud of some sort. People keep saying, this could be an element of the news, that it's been proven that there's no fraud. I don't think that's true or need to remain true. I think it's a danger. Probably in this election, there's many reasons why it has to be accepted, something like this in many places, because of the pandemic and people reluctant to go to the ballot box. And it's not going to change. We're moving in this direction. I could accept the idea of mail-in ballots in places like Washington, where maybe people don't cheat every day. I can't see having mail-in ballots in Chicago. Can you? Or in New Jersey, and have it believe that it's going to be fair. I just don't believe it would happen. So I think there are risks. How great they are, I'm not sure, but I think there are risks. And this raises questions about, if the election's really close, who's going to allege risks, where are they? It raises problems, I believe. How great they are, I'm not sure. As for the involvement of the federal courts, which has been taking place, you've had the state laws. Then you've had the state courts that have stepped in and have sometimes unilaterally changed the rulings of the legislatures by saying we have to allow for votes to be counted up to 6 or 10 days after the election, some judge saying this. And then the federal courts beginning to step in and calling this into question. And the federal courts do have a role in this. You wouldn't think so, but since the Constitution assigns the voting of electors finally to the state legislatures, they're the final say of who gets the electors in each state. It is a federal question. And some of the federal decisions have overturned now some of the state courts' decision and say, you got to have some uniformity or at least consistency in what the laws is. You can't be going a week before the election and saying you're going to report ballots that come in 6 or 10 days after. It's always a problem to count ballots after an election, because then people count ballots knowing who won and lost, and they may count them in a different way. It's a challenge. So I haven't studied this that closely, but I worry that there could be difficulties. And that brings us into this post-election period. If we're close enough in some of the states, and if Trump should lose certain states by a small amount or something like that by the first day's reporting and bring it up, or vice versa, the Democrats, what's going to happen in the country? Who's going to step in? This is what opens things up to possibly the courts, or Congress could play a role in deciding. Something like the election of 1876, where someone's going to have to decide what's the true electoral vote amidst a lot of controversy. That was when Tilden lost, unfortunately. What he thought I forget who won, but I know Tilden lost.
Well, we're Hayes partisans here in Ohio.
Oh, okay, good. Didn't Hayes go to Kenyon College too?
Yeah, something like that.
I remember seeing his name somewhere around there.
There's a student has a question, sort of piggybacking off your remarks about Trump and the media this year, and the media's coverage of the campaign, which is the place of presidential rhetoric and oratory in the campaign. Joe Biden, Donald Trump is no Ronald Reagan, and Joe Biden, frankly, is no Barack Obama from the point of view of giving a speech and rhetoric. The student's question is, does that matter anymore? Does this campaign show that there really is no more place for powerful and moving speeches that actually change people's minds and persuade people? Is that aspect of presidential election gone, or is that just a function of this particular environment with these particular candidates?
Okay, I may take a little bit of issue with the student who asked the question. I think the last 3 or 4 elections show, strangely, the importance of rhetoric. Maybe not, look at Obama running in 2008, that may be before your student was politically conscious. But Obama, through his rhetoric, was able to acquire the nomination of the Democratic Party. In fact, Obama, let's be open about it. Obama in 2008 was not just running to be the nominee of the Democratic Party. He was not running to be the president of the world. And honestly, he was elected as president of the world. Go back and look at that election and see where Obama was followed everywhere in the world. People were wearing Obama t-shirts, from Bangladesh to I don't know where, everywhere. And of course, he traveled to Europe during the campaign to show he was elected. He was the world's candidate, and he did it through his rhetoric. You can criticize the rhetoric all you want and say it's poor rhetoric, but it was certainly effective rhetoric. I thought very, very effective rhetoric. And in fact, his speech for the nomination campaign in 2008 at the Democratic Convention, before Greek pillars in an open stadium, it was the strangest thing I had ever seen. It was a commemoration of this new world leader. It didn't last all that long, maybe as long as he was received the Nobel Peace Prize, and a little bit after that. But so that was important. And now the one who's equal in some ways to Obama, or in the same, is Donald Trump on the lower side. Obama, in a way, is the man of hope and change from the top. And here's Donald Trump, in a way, doing this from another point of view, a more angry, active point of view. But the rhetoric was one of the things that pushed him forward in the nomination campaign, surprised everyone. I mean, the rhetoric was astounding. At first I can't accept the way he speaks. But I watch these campaigns and I see how he's able to speak to a crowd for 2 hours and hold their attention time after time after time. Not even Castro could do that, even though people were required to attend. So he's got something in this. He knows how to react with people. And rhetoric in that case remains an important part of our campaigns. I would say, going back to ancient Greece, when you first had rhetoric being important inside of Athens, Pericles being able to speak to the audience, in a way it's come back to that status. So it shouldn't be underestimated.
Looking at this as a political scientist who cares about the health of the body politic, your scholarship has always been informed sort of, it's not value free. You care about the health of America as a constitutional republic. What reforms, if any, does this election show you that we need in presidential campaigns?
In the campaigns or
or in the selection process more broadly? I'm not asking you to give us a list of proposed constitutional amendments here. Just your thought on what this shows us about the health of the country, but particularly what reforms need to take place, if any, in the way we select presidents.
Well, the main thing would be going back to the nomination process. There's no doubt now what's happened is that you can win an election, a nomination, without the support of your party regulars. Trump showed that. Bernie Sanders almost showed it. I thought he was going to win this time. Okay, so the parties, over the course of their history, had a certain function as institutions, which was to nominate someone who was safe, to weed out the people who were dangerous. Maybe they could play some role during the campaign, but they wouldn't get the nomination. We've had some pretty bland and safe guys nominated for president of the United States. It's not going to happen. There are a lot of people in Washington today who I admire them, Jonathan Rauch and others, who say we should go back to this system. Well, we have to return to this. I don't think it's going to happen. Maybe it would be better if it is, but it's pretty hard to go back and de-democratize something. The current system looks to be democratic. So I think we have to learn to live in this new environment where everything is open, and potentially the parties as institutions don't perform this function. And all due regard for Jonathan Rauch, who's written some great books and everything like that. And I don't see it's happening. I think these people are whistling in the dark. So I think we're seeing the effects of democracy, its ill effects, and it could be the good effects too. I mean, it opens things up to challenges, allows the status quo to be challenged as it has been, all sorts of ways. But this is the world in which we live, and we're just going to have to get used to it and keep our fingers crossed that most of the time we get good candidates. So in short, to go back to it, I was always worried. You mentioned my first book. The whole nominating process was an effort over the time to look for ways to prevent demagogues from achieving the nomination of their parties. And it performed pretty well in doing that. We don't have that assurance anymore.
What's going to be the biggest surprise? What are observers overlooking in this election?
The outcome. That could be the biggest surprise. I mean, if you go by the science, and I kind of go by the science, I didn't see what else are you going to go by. Biden's the winner of this race. I mean, he has, according to the pollsters, he has an advantage, a large enough advantage to be able to win if things go as they're supposed to. Of course, they said that in 2016 as well. I remember 2016, I taught a seminar on Tuesday night on the election because I came home. I turned on the television. The early reporters were all saying what they were supposed to, what they learned from the exit polls, that Hillary was ahead. And I fell asleep. My wife didn't wake me up. And at midnight, I wake up and I hear someone on television saying, there's maybe a way that Hillary could still pull this out. I was like Rip Van Winkle. I went to sleep in one world, I woke up in another world. So that's always quite possible that we would see a kind of surprise in this election with Trump winning. That would be the greatest surprise. I think it's at this point in the view of the media and how things are presented, it's presented as less, more likely that that Biden would win than Hillary at the same time in 2016. So we expect this more, and close, but we expect this more. So that would make it a real surprise. But then the outcome, how people are going to accept the outcome, is a real matter. Democracy, in a way, is always rested on the idea that you might cheat a little bit in the election and whatnot, but once it's over, that you accept the outcome. And that was the great thing in the election of 1800. Jefferson won. Not so much through popular voting, but popular sentiment, he won. And this is the first time that, in a way, you've had a shift of parties with the opposition party accepting the result. And we've had that other than 1860 in this country. We've had the idea that you kind of accept the outcome. Who knows what's going to happen this time? We have a lot to worry about. I would hope it would be a peaceful outcome. Same if Biden wins. I don't see the right, except for a few fanatics, doing much. But if the left loses, because they'll have the national majority, there's a lot of left militias in this case, which I don't think it would accept Trump's victory. Who knows what will happen?
Well, that's a sobering way to conclude. But I think I'd only add one more thing, which is that moray, to use Tocqueville's language, of accepting the outcome is really powerful.
Yeah.
Still, I think it persists, and with the exception of perhaps people on the fringes, probably still obtains in the vast, vast, vast majority of Americans.
That's because you teach at Ashland, and I'm at a major university. Who knows what will happen? But we'll see. I think you are right. I mean, I think we could count on some violence and looting and all sorts of things like that, but that it won't reach historic proportions, and we'll get over it. So I hope, and I hope your students could hope that and see the importance of it. There's really no alternative to accepting the rules of the game other than chaos. That point should be stressed to all. I mean, think of what the consequences are of not accepting what is an outcome according to the rules of the game. It's a horrible prospect.
Jim, thank you so much for taking this time. It's flown by. I'm sorry to those in attending. We weren't able to get to all the questions, but I do appreciate everybody's participation and sending in those great questions. I hope we covered a lot of them. Appreciate Jim being here with us today to take the time, coming back from last week and doing this with us. It really is going to be, as they say, an important election. But as Jim says, some big questions about America are raised in this election, and we'll see. We'll see if those constitutional norms hold. I hope they do. Of course, I think we all hope they do, and think they will. But we really appreciate all of you joining us. If you want to learn more about Ashbrook, if you don't know about our work or would like to know more, look us up at ashbrook.org. Our website has all kinds of great information on the center and our programs. Also, those of you who might be teachers or have students in school or homeschooling your kids these days, take a look for historical resources at TAH.org, which is our website for teachers and homeschool parents for great primary source historical documents. You'll be sent a link to a recording of today's webinar. Please, as always, share that far and wide. We want to get Jim's insights out there to as many people as we can, so they can have a more informed understanding of this election. So we ask that you would feel free to send that to friends and family. Our goal in this, as always, we believe very profoundly that you can learn from history, that we can study the past, have a conversation with it, and get historical perspective on contemporary issues that deepens our insight and gives us the habits of thought and reflection that are necessary for self-government. And Jim, I would appreciate you coming and helping us in that conversation and that thinking today. And really also to renew our own understanding of America and our fundamental principles. I think when we renew our understanding of those, there's always grounds for hope. And we appreciate that candor, that optimism, that hope in the discussion today, and hope that spirit pervades the rest of this week and on through the next couple of weeks of the election and its aftermath. And so I want to thank you for joining us. And as always, as I say, stay healthy, stay hopeful, and stay connected with Ashbrook. Thank you.
Thanks again for listening. You can learn more about the Ashbrook Center, an independent, nonpartisan nonprofit at Ashland University in Ohio, at ashbrook.org. And you can learn about our teaching and teacher resources at teachingamericanhistory.org or tah.org.